Hey there, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating, highly structured observation from our source material. We're going to be looking at exactly how we relate to time and memory. Now, just to be clear right off the bat, we aren't looking at this through the lens of therapy or self-help or some kind of personal transformation journey. Not at all. Instead, we're just purely and objectively observing the cognitive mechanics of memory. We're exploring the actual architecture of how we process time, all to answer one incredibly specific question. Why can the meaning of the past change later?
Okay, so to really understand this, we have to start with a fundamental truth, right? The events of the past simply cannot be changed. Historical facts are completely immutable. The exact words that were spoken, those broken relationships, periods of total silence, failures, the paths we walked past and didn't choose, these are fixed, locked-in coordinates in time. We can't just magically make them not happen. But, that brings us to this central, really interesting paradox posed by our source material. The events themselves can't be changed, sure, but must their meaning remain unchanged to us as time goes on? Well, this paradox is a whole lot easier to wrap our heads around if we think about it spatially. Let's break it down into steps. Step 1. The historical event remains exactly the same. No change there. But step 2, your observing present changes. Think of it kind of like looking at a mountain. The mountain hasn't moved an inch, but your coordinate, your actual observational position in the present, has shifted. And because your position shifted, we hit step 3. The actual pathway connecting you to that past event completely changes. And therefore, step 4, the meaning changes. An experience that was once just rigidly categorized as a total failure might later, from a completely new observational point, appear as a really necessary turning point to a different path. Or, conversely, something you thought was totally harmless at the time might later be recognized as a massive burden. The absolute crucial takeaway here is that the historical fact did not change. What changed is the present position from which that past is being observed.
So what actually happens when we don't allow that observational shift to occur? Well, when an event happens, it often gets locked into just a single interpretation. For example, you might say, I failed at that time, and that rapidly hardens into a totally fixed self-narrative like, I am a person who fails. Or maybe I was rejected morphs into this sweeping rule. People will eventually leave. In this state, memory isn't just an archive anymore. It literally begins to function as a predictive rule. Now, it is important to note that extracting rules from past events is a completely natural cognitive process. It's exactly how we humans generalize from past experience to avoid danger, so we don't have to calculate every single decision from scratch every single time. But here's the catch. The structural risk is that this single historical trajectory ends up monopolizing the prediction of the future, which effectively restricts your present choices. The past rule is basically categorizing the present before you can even observe that you have new options. And that realization leads us directly to the mechanics of reinterpretation. Now, reinterpretation is absolutely not about deleting the past. You don't have to look back and say your original interpretation was somehow a mistake. Actually, given your knowledge, your environment, and your available choices at that specific time, well, that was literally the only meaning available to you. So, you don't delete it. Instead, as time passes and you gather new observations and fresh experiences, you just layer an additional meaning right on top. You rebuild the path, you branch out, you maintain that original trace, but you establish multiple new paths of connection between your present self and that fixed past event.
At its absolute core, reinterpretation is really just the capacity to hold multiple meanings at the exact same time. It's a structural coexistence. Our source material heavily emphasizes that you don't just replace one story with a completely new one. No, these statements can mathematically coexist in your mind. Things like, it was painful at the time, and the experience contributed to my present boundaries, and some parts still remain entirely unknown. When multiple meanings are allowed to exist simultaneously like that, the past is basically liberated from being just one single restrictive explanation. To really grasp this, we can actually break memory down into a neat little conceptual formula. Though, keep in mind, this is the framework used in the source material, not some absolute scientific claim. But it's super helpful. Basically, memory is not a static hard drive. It is definitely not an exact, perfectly preserved recording that you just hit play on. Instead, memory equals the traces of the past, plus the present observational position, plus the specific question being asked right now. So when you remember something, that historical trace comes into direct contact with your current emotions, your current knowledge, your relationships, self-image, and your environment. Within this framework, remembering is not simply replaying the past. It is a renewed, incredibly dynamic interference between the past and the present. It's literally generated in the present moment, every single time. Which brings us to a very strict logical boundary that we really need to draw. We're talking about the massive structural difference between idealization and reinterpretation. See, idealization takes pain, turns it into this tidy little story of growth, and concludes that the event was somehow necessary. The real danger here is that responsibility, boundaries, and the simple fact that the harm could have been avoided, all of that just becomes totally invisible. It creates this closed loop. True reinterpretation, on the other hand, starts with the absolute fact of the pain. The original meaning is retained. The responsibility and the boundaries remain completely intact. But, and here's the key, a new meaning is added from your present position, which opens up more choices. It absolutely does not mean everything happens for a reason. What it does is leave room for the pain while still allowing you to build a totally new pathway forward. And this leads us right to the source's precise, really thought-provoking definition of recoverability. It states that recoverability does not mean that wounds disappear. It means that the past no longer completely determines the choices available in the present and future. I mean, that is such a powerful analytical distinction, right? We are not erasing history. We aren't trying to time travel back to the person we were before the event, because frankly, that coordinate doesn't exist anymore. Recoverability simply means ensuring a single past event doesn't get a monopoly over your entire trajectory. The wound is retained in the structure for sure, but a totally different movement, a whole new set of choices, becomes mathematically possible again. So we finally arrive at the end of this structural breakdown, and I want to leave you with an open question. Based on all the mechanics we've just observed today, what does it actually mean to accept the past? Does accepting the past mean freezing it in place, basically giving it a single, finalized meaning that just dictates your future forever? Or does it mean living alongside it, completely acknowledging its reality, while allowing its structure to remain fluid, and its meaning completely open to change as your present coordinate continues to shift? It's definitely something to chew on as you consider exactly how you observe your own history.